One of the things when I do this, some days, like 2 days ago, I felt a little, I don't know, just energy was down. I think it was because I stayed up too late the night before. And then days like yesterday, I felt good. I felt energy was up. Today, I need to move a little bit. I've been sitting and watching actually a sermon, so it kind of brought me down. So here we go. This stuff we're going to look at today, I think, is really, really good, really important for us. And we are in what is called the Sermon on the Mount. And this is Jesus beginning his ministry in the book of Matthew. We're in chapter 5, starting in verse 13. The Sermon on the Mount is, it's heavy stuff. I mean, Jesus just goes right in and starts dealing with where people are at, and it's very heavy words that he has to say. And he started it yesterday. We looked at where he started it, where he kind of flipped everything from what we naturally do. He flipped it upside down, where he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Okay, so Jesus is putting in the word blessed or blessed is really in this chapter speaking of happiness. This is where we find joy and happiness, and this is where fulfillment will come, as being these people. And all of these things that Jesus has spoken about, the being poor in spirit, pure in heart, peacemakers, merciful, meek, it has this sense of what we could do in our strength and in our power is held back, that we're not doing, we're holding back, we're not speaking out and picking fights. We're truly being the ones who are more maybe strategic, but maybe just gentle. And we're stepping back and not weak. We said that yesterday, not weak. Good morning, Mela. We're not weak, but we are holding back what we could do. We're holding back maybe our tongue at times, and we're holding back and letting God kind of own the moment, letting God take care of the things that we care about, instead of just kind of pushing our own forward. Okay, so this is how Jesus flipped it upside down. That the blessing isn't the one who's like constantly trying to get ahead, but he's the one who comes and just says, you know what, God will take care of us. God will do it. I'm going to hold back on some of my strength, and I'm going to practice meekness. I'm gonna I love the poor in spirit, just this spiritual poverty, this like, hey, I don't have it all together, even myself, and being that one. So now we're going to pick up in verse 13. As Jesus is speaking and teaching, he says, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? So, salt, interesting. Salt has many kind of purposes. It has many things that we use it for flavor. I know that's the main thing I've always used salt for. It's somebody makes me some food, and it's like, hey, could you pass the salt? I can guarantee I want more salt on it. I like salty food. It brings out the flavor. It adds flavor to the meal. There is, in a sense, as a Christian, as the one who follows Jesus, that's our role in society, that we come and that we bring a flavor, that we ought to bring a flavor, that we bring the flavor of Jesus into all that we touch and all that we interact with. Salt also makes you thirsty. It causes us, when we eat, it causes us to need some water in our pray a latte cup, or cheesy cup, I know. It causes us to be thirsty. It causes this desire for water. And so I believe that as a Christian, that's our role. That we ought to make there a thirst for Jesus, that people, when they interact with us, when they talk to us, they want to follow after Jesus. One of the things that I've seen is we often in modern kind of Christian community, we think that we should just say what we say because it's the right thing to say, instead of ever focusing on or thinking about what result we're after. What do we want to see? Maybe somebody's in some kind of a sin or some compromised lifestyle, and so we say, well, something's got to be said, something's got to be done. Good morning, Salt Sea. Oh, salt seasoning. Oh, sorry. I got to read. Andy Platter is my buddy, and he is on with me this morning on YouTube. So good, man. But here we. Where was I at? Sorry, Andy. I keep commenting. Don't let my distraction distract you from commenting. I love the interaction. But this salt. It makes us thirsty. It makes us want more. And we don't often, this is where I was at. We don't often think about the result that we're after. We don't often think about, so if somebody's in that sinful, compromised lifestyle, we say, well, it's all about saying what needs to be said. And sometimes saying what needs to be said isn't helping us move in the direction that we ought to be moving. And it's not helping that person get out of that lifestyle. It's just causing us to rant. And that's kind of where a lot of where Christianity has seemingly gone, is that we just talk a lot and we just rant a lot. And we're not really asking the question, how do I help this person get out of this bondage to this sinful act or lifestyle that they might be part of? We ought to be able to go in with God leading us. We should be able to go into a situation and create a thirst for Jesus, that people, not that we look at their lifestyle and we kind of just beat up on them, but that they look at our lifestyle and they say, I want what you have. I'm thirsty for what you have. Salt. I had several things. Salt, they say, has healing properties as well. Salt is a preservative. Salt is a preservative. Actually, up until recent modern history, we did not have refrigerators. So the main way that you would keep food fresh, the main way that you would keep the meat that you had from rotting was that you would salt it heavily. One of the things in kind of canned foods and things like that, processed foods, is the main ingredient that they've got in there is going to be salt to preserve it. I believe that the Christian life is a preserving thing, that we should be able to keep the culture around us from rotting. That's part of our job. Now, here's the thing. If the culture is going downhill, if the culture is rotting, if the culture is going in the direction that it ought not to go, we tend to be those that like to point our finger and blame. We like to say, look how rotten the world is. But truly, in a sense, as Christians, it's like, well, if the world is rotting, that's because the salt has lost its saltiness. It's lost its ability to keep the world from rotting. And so we are much more responsible than we think we are. We look and we can blame the TV shows that they watch or the news programs that are on, and we can blame everything else. We can blame the agenda of everybody else, but truly, what about our part? And there's a healthy thing, and this is something I try to teach my kids, and I try to kind of adapt to my own life. If it's not my fault, then I can't be part of the solution. If I'm not the problem, then I can't be part of the solution. Unless I own the problem, unless I say, you know what, it's my fault. When I used to play basketball, I still play basketball, but when I used to play competitively, I got into this habit because I was a big shot. I thought I was good. And so I got into this habit when I would play basketball that every time there was a turnover, every time I missed a shot, every time something went wrong, I would say, hey guys, that's my fault. Every time a guy on their team would score and I didn't help out to stop him from scoring, sorry guys, that's my fault. Because I just had this belief that if it's my fault, maybe I can be part of the solution. If it's my fault, maybe I can do better next time. Maybe I can help out next time. Maybe I can take a better shot. Maybe I can play a little harder next time. But if I go up and down the court all the time saying it's your fault, you're the one taking the bad shot, you're the one doing this, you're the one doing it wrong, you're the one not playing defense, now we're just going to lose. We don't have any chance because I'm not taking my part in this process. I think we need to do that. I think we need to own our part. We need to say, you know what? We're the salt of the earth. My job is to help keep this world from rotting. My job is to help the world become thirsty after Jesus. My job is to bring a flavor of Jesus into everything I touch. But then look at this. Look at this, and still in verse 13. But if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. There is another use for salt. I live in San Diego now, but I lived a short time ago. I spent last winter in Spokane, Washington. And in Spokane, Washington, especially last winter, it was very cold. Now, in a cold climate, and when you get snow and ice, maybe you've experienced, sometimes your car will get stuck in the snow. Or maybe your sidewalk will get covered in ice and it becomes dangerous to walk in. And so one of the values of salt is that you can take the salt and you can throw it out on the sidewalk and it will help melt the ice and it will help clear the walkway and give traction to you as you're walking in and out of the building or in and out of your house. This is one of the uses of salt, to be trampled underfoot by men. Now, Jesus is saying this in a negative way. If you've lost your saltiness, then what use do you have? You are simply going to be used for traction, thrown on the sidewalk so people can walk into the house. Good morning, Stephanie. Good to see you on here. You're going to be used for traction. Now, here's something, just as I was thinking about this. So much of where we're at today in Christian culture, and we just need to own this. We just need to own this. So much of where we are in Christian culture is we are simply traction for the world around us. We are being walked on and we are being used as traction. Here's the thing. I think that the Christian church sold more Harry Potter books than almost any marketing strategy that they had. Now, I'm not against or for Harry Potter, but I know that the church decided that they were going to rise up when Harry Potter first started making its big waves as a book and as a movie. And so the church wanted to make sure, hey, don't go see that movie. Don't go see that movie. That was one of the best marketing strategies that they could have had. Here's an interesting thing. If you can get the Christian church against you, they will sell more of your books and more of your movies than almost anything else that you could do. Christians will we will rant and we will rage and still, like, 3/4 of all people in church will still go see the movie. But man, publicly, we're going to go out there and we're going to tell you, don't see this, don't see this, don't see this. I know that there are pastors out there who are writing books, and many people in churches are saying, hey, don't read this book, don't read this book. And they're mentioning them in sermon after sermon after sermon. And all it does is help whoever you're trying to stop gain traction. I wonder what that does with all the other communities that are in the world, all of the things that we stand against. Christians are known primarily for what they stand against, and all of that does is create traction for the one that they stand against. If you lose the saltiness, you're no longer providing that thirst of Jesus. We're no longer providing that flavor of Jesus. We're no longer preserving the culture as we should. Now, all we are is traction. And as we're trying to stop things in a way that isn't proper, we're trying to change the culture in a way that isn't fruitful, we're actually providing traction for those that are against Jesus. Verse 14 says this, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." Jesus says we're not only the salt of the earth, but we're the light of the world. We are the ones who show the world what light is, not just pointing out darkness all the time. That tends to be our go-to move. Let's just point out darkness. You know, I get a lot of what I'm saying from my Facebook feed. I've got a lot of Christians on my Facebook feed, and it just seems like what we do, we don't point to the light. We don't lighten the room. We just tell everybody where the darkness is. We spend the majority of our time speaking about darkness and very little of our time speaking about light. Jesus says, you're the light of the world. And then he says, set that light on a stand. I think the King James is, you light a candle and you put it on a candlestick. You lighten the room. When I was a kid, this is going to make me sound like I'm 200 years old. When I was a kid, I grew up with no running water and no electricity in our house. And so when we would come home at nighttime, we would have to find a lantern. That's how we lit our house in the evening. We had these kerosene lanterns, and it had a little glass bulb that you would put on the top. And so it would be pitch black in the house, and we would have to feel around and find the lantern and find a matchbook and light a match and then put the bulb on. And then all of a sudden the house would illuminate with light. It wasn't so simple as just flipping a switch. This was more probably closer to what Jesus is talking about, where it would just lighten the house. And it was always amazing to see. You would position your lantern in the right place in the house so you could see light throughout the house. And that's the purpose of light, that light would shine throughout. And that's our job. That's our job as believers. That's the job of those that follow Jesus, is people who follow Jesus we're that light. Now, what he says about the light, he says, let them see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Let them see your good works. Now, not let them hear your good words. That's part of it, sure. But it's let them see your good works. It's in the doing. Let them see not only what you stand against, but what are you doing? Every time the good works, every time we show generosity, nobody can argue with that. Every time we show we're honest, nobody can argue with that. Nobody can stand against us and say, that guy is just a punk. That guy is just all attitude. They won't say that. The person who is generous, the person who is giving, the person, yes, with words, the person who is encouraging. I love to be around people who are encouraging. I mean, whether they're Christians or not Christian, I don't care. People who just encourage me and strengthen me. Let them see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. I had a friend. I tell his story from time to time. His name is Nate Cox. He lives in, I don't know where he lives now. He lives on the East Coast somewhere. I remember I worked at a camp with him, and he went on this canoe trip for 5 days with a group of about 12 kids. And one of the kids came back and said to me, when he got back from the trip, he said, "Nate is awesome." And I said, I know he is, but why are you saying he's awesome? And he says, man, because Nate doesn't care about himself. This is a high school kid. He's like, Nate doesn't care about himself. He said Nate would go, we would hit a dry spot in the river and we'd have to carry the canoes. And Nate with a smile on his face, and he's talking to us and just enjoying us, and we're enjoying him. And he goes and he grabs a couple of canoes and he says, hey, grab the other side. And he carries the canoes to the other spot. And then he goes back and he grabs more canoes, and he's just constantly working and working and working. And the whole time he's not complaining. He's just working hard and he's just enjoying it. And he's like, man, it stood out so much. And here was a kid who had seen the good works of Nate, and he was glorifying God in that he just didn't care about himself. He was a servant. Let them see your good works. Let them see, hey, I'm going to bless people. I'm going to encourage people. There's one other part that I wanted to talk about in this section before we move on to the next section. He says they don't put it, when you light the lamp, you don't put the lamp under a basket, but on a lampstand. Now, this idea of putting a lamp under a basket seems really silly, but here's the lamps that we have today. Yeah, you put it under a basket, it gets dark in the house, but I think it's more than that. When you grow up in a world where your light is literally a lantern and it's literally a flame, if you put that thing under a basket, you're going to burn your house down. It's going to destroy everything. It's going to not only not serve the purpose that it's supposed to serve, which is lighting the house, it's going to destroy everything. As you begin to hide the light and suppress the light in the room, it'll burn the house down. That was something we didn't burn the house down, but I remember my parents having that talk with us when I was a kid. Like, you don't put anything over the top of that bulb. That could burn everything. Let's look at this next section. We got just a few minutes left. Verse 17. Do not think, Jesus says, I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Now, for any of you who don't fully know what he's saying there, at the time that Jesus is preaching, everything in this side of the Bible, so the majority side right here, that is the law and the prophets. That is the Old Testament. The Old Testament is filled with rules. It's filled with do's and don'ts. It's filled with you've got, the Ten Commandments is the famous thing. It's got tons of rules and regulations. Many people have believed, well, Jesus did away with all of that. It's not important anymore. Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish the law. I didn't come to make it so that it's not important and not valuable. I came to fulfill the law. Here's the message in this. The law of God is good and perfect. The problem is I am not good and perfect. The problem is I cannot keep the law. The problem is I'm guilty of breaking even some of the 10 commandments. Even just the top 10, right? Now, you would think that the 10 commandments is all there is, but no, there's books and books of laws, of all the little details of things that you should be able to do and can't do, and the way, you got to kill a goat and kill a sheep and get blood all over everything, and this is your way, not to have made it so that you're completely clean of it, just to cover you during the time. So he didn't come to abolish the law, but Jesus says he came to fulfill the law. Jesus isn't saying, I've come to make the law of no importance. He says, I'm going to keep the law. Jesus kept the law perfectly. He kept it before God. The law is good, but only Jesus can keep it. That's the key, I think, to the entirety of the Sermon on the Mount, the message that is coming on here. We're going to look next week at the details of the law. But we ought to, as we go through the law, as we go through the Old Testament, it should cause us to realize, I can't do this. I can't keep this. And so what Jesus is saying is, if you think you're going to be part of the kingdom of heaven by your own strength and own works, you're wrong. It can't happen. It can only happen through Jesus, because he is the only one who can fulfill the law. And then let's keep going. I got to find my spot again. He came to fulfill them. Verse 18, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one iota, not a dot, not a crossing of a T, not a dotting of an I, not a single letter will pass from the law until it is accomplished. The law is good. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Here's the thing. The law of God is good. Every detail of the law of God is good. Every detail. The law, the rules are good. I mean, some of the rules seem ridiculous. They had a hard stand on taking Saturday off. A hard stand. This was, you do no work on the Sabbath. I think that there are times in the Old Testament people died. They were killed if they worked on Saturday. The law was a very high standard. These things seem ridiculous, but here's the thing. We can study now. We can realize now. We can realize now that law of the seventh day off, that law of taking a day off, is actually really, really healthy for us. In a culture that works 7 days a week, that's not a healthy culture. And over time, you're going to get more accomplished in your 6 days of work than you would in 7 days of work, believe it or not. The laws about what to eat and what not to eat. It's strange laws, but those laws are good. We've found that if we eat, especially in their day, when they didn't know as much about nutrition as we do, if you just simply followed what the law said you should eat and stayed away from the things the law said you shouldn't eat, you would have a healthier culture. You would be a healthier people. The law is good. The problem is we can't keep the law. So only Jesus can keep the law. Only Jesus does keep the law. And then look at this, verse 20. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. To be part of God's kingdom, our righteousness has to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. Now, you've got to understand who the scribes and Pharisees were. The scribes and Pharisees, the Pharisees, man, these guys knew the book. These guys were the teachers of the law. These guys were the guys who had all the answers. If you had a question, you would go and you would ask the Pharisee. The scribes were the ones who were writing it out. They were the ones who were passing it on. They were the ones who were spending their time. They didn't have printing presses. They weren't printing Bibles. They were taking the scriptures and they were writing them daily. They would write out and they would study and they would know the book better than anyone else. And they would live by this. Listen, it was I heard today that there was a saying that was said that if only two people ever got to heaven, one of them would have been a scribe and the other would have been a Pharisee. The scribes and the Pharisees were the highest esteemed religious people in the culture. So to get a perspective on this, Jesus just said, if you and I think about the most spiritual person that we know, the most godly person we've ever met, Jesus just said, unless you're better than them, you cannot be part of the kingdom of God. That's heavy. Here's what we're looking at here. This is the beginning, verse 20, I believe, of a parenthetical statement. This is the first parenthesis, and the other one is at the very end of the chapter. So if you have a Bible with you, you're going to look, and verse 48 of the same chapter, chapter 5, it says this: you therefore must be perfect as your Father is perfect. Okay? That's the other one. So two things. Your righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. And then on the other side, you must be perfect. That is the standard of being part of the kingdom of heaven. Now, this is absolutely key. We can't do it. We cannot be this. Okay? Now, there may be some that will watch this and say, okay, I'm going to live up to that standard. Good luck. Come on back when you realize you cannot do it. The goal is not that we can do it. The goal is that Jesus can do it. And apart from Jesus, our righteousness does not come from us doing these things. Our righteousness comes from Jesus doing these things and us simply coming to Jesus. Our righteousness comes from, hey, I am not righteous because of me. I'm righteous because Jesus paid the cost of my sin. Jesus kept the law. Jesus fulfilled the law. Jesus is and was perfect. Jesus, we saw already, was tempted as I am tempted, but he didn't sin even though I did. Jesus goes to the cross. Jesus dies on the cross for sin. His blood comes to me, and all I have to do is I have to look to Jesus on the cross, and I have to say, you know what, my righteousness comes from him. My righteousness comes from him alone. And so in the sight of God, I am perfect. And in the sight of God, I am holy. And in the sight of God, my righteousness does exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees. That holiness is mine, not because of me, but because of him. So those are the two parentheses. We're about to wrap it up here. But what we're going to see as Jesus will get very much more specific, he will speak, and we'll look at this on Monday. He'll speak of anger. He'll speak of lust. He'll speak of divorce. He'll speak of taking oaths. He'll speak of getting even with the ones who's wronged us. He'll speak of our enemies. He'll teach us how we are to be with these types of things. This is what we're going to look at for a good part of next week. But here's the goal for all of these things. If you read ahead, when we speak of anger and lust and divorce, I believe what Jesus wants to do with these sections is he wants to show us that we're guilty. He wants to show us that we're guilty in every single one of them. Not that it raises some crazy standard and then we say, hey, I'm going to try harder. But instead that we come away and we're just going to say, oh, I need Jesus more than I thought I did. And his grace and his mercy is enough, and it is there. So that's all I got for today. Thank you guys for getting up early with me today. So good to see you. I've got some comments. So I'm gonna let the YouTube one run for a few minutes while I read through which comments I missed. But I so appreciate you guys who joined me on a Saturday morning. I know some of you guys got up early on the day that you're supposed to go to sleep and sleep in, right? So I really appreciate you guys. Tomorrow, if you can, if you're not part of a church somewhere, I just encourage you visit a church, see what God has for you. Go there with just a, hey, can I give? Can I support? Can I serve? If you got to work, you got to work. But if you can make it, I'd say hit something up. So we'll see you guys on Monday. God bless you guys, and thank you so much for jumping in with me this morning. See you. Dun, dun, dun. I'm a mom, so I don't sleep in. Love it, Becky. All right, I'm just going to read through some comments here real quick before I sign off on YouTube. Got to post the Facebook one, though. There we go. Sorry, a lot of pushing of buttons. So we've got, Andy had a lot to say. I love it. We are here to be the salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors in London. I love it. If you lose your saltiness, how will people ever taste godliness? That is so good. We are light bearers, shining God's colors in the world. He made us light bearers and put us on a light stand. I believe Jesus used salt and light purposefully for their different properties. I so like that. Salt is noticeable when it comes into contact, and then powerfully so. Light doesn't care about conflict. It just exposes and confronts. And then salt is noticeable when it comes into contact. Oh, sorry, that's the one I read. Today, let's try to be both salt and light in the world and to share the hope of Jesus with people we meet. So good, so good. Becky, relaxed comments are everywhere today. Our commandments are everywhere today. So true. I'm a mom, so I don't sleep. I love it. Light and salt is so relevant, right? It's such good stuff. I really feel like this is I believe that the Sermon on the Mount is incredibly relevant, especially as we're going to get into anger and we're going to get into lust. We're going to look at all that kind of stuff next week. So see you guys on Monday. Wake up with me, 6 o'clock. We'll be here. Divorce, yes, for sure. We'll talk about that next week. I'm not sure how far we'll get on Monday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll get through all that stuff. So cool. See you guys Monday. Have a good Sunday. Worship with somebody. Encourage somebody today and tomorrow. See you guys. Oh, I got to hit the button. It's being covered up.